Well, thank you for this special occasion for me to be here with you again and to share from God's Word. Winding down my time here in Mexico this time, but Lord willing, I've been invited to come back again next year or later this year, I should say, for Bible school, where God has richly, richly blessed. I could not tell you the value of being able to be at Bible school, not just for the students, but for all of us who experience God's goodness to us. It's so real. And it's important that you as parents think about future opportunities for your kids to go to Bible school, because it is a real place. It's not just learning more of God's Word and getting to experience what God has for you in your life, but it's a fellowship. It's an opportunity for young people to come together and to experience God's goodness and getting to know each other and having fellowship. I think this year was so special because there were more couples at the end of Bible school than there were certainly at the beginning of Bible school. So it was just a good thing. And it was so great to see God working and the young people being blessed. And for some of us to be there and to help these young people in issues. Last time I was here, I gave my testimony, and so you are familiar with where I come from. I'm from Canada. I'm privileged to be here in Mexico at the Bible school. And Lord willing, I just want to share this with you because this is really special for me. Next year, or later this year, I hope to go to Kansas City, to the Mennonite community in Kansas City. I've been invited there. And then from there to go to towards, there's another little stopover on the way to Seminole. And then I will be in Seminole for maybe a period of about 4 weeks, doing meetings and reaching out to the needs of the people in the Mennonite community in Seminole. I was there this year, but to go back is very special. I'm working with people from Seminole, and it's really, really important for us to have further opportunity to reach and to help individuals, couples, individuals with issues that are really important for us to deal with. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about desires. Desires are a big thing in the Bible. There's a lot of talking about desires in the Bible. Right from the beginning of time, we know what God's desire is. And I just want to ask you folks at the booth, is it possible that, okay, you've got it now, so I think I can read it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to refer to my iPad. Okay, so desires is a very important topic, like I said. Right from the beginning of time, God had a purpose for us. I just want to give you a little bit of a meaning of what desire. A meaning is, the meaning of desires, it's a strong feeling of wanting to have something or wishing something to happen. It's something that's pretty deep inside us. It's something that we and even God had for us from the very beginning of time. He had a desire for us. His will for us was to know him. And he created us with a will and a desire to have fellowship with us. And so as we go, I think we're having a little technical. Okay, very good. So, okay. So I'm a little confused. I can't. Okay, so thinking of God's desire from the beginning of time, it's broken down in many different ways, and one of the ways that it's broken down is in the various areas, and we're going to talk about them briefly as we go through. From the beginning of time, God has planned that we would know his salvation, especially in this day in which we live, in the day of grace. In the New Testament era, God has purposed and given us his so great salvation. He has purposed us to have his so great salvation. And he is not willing that any should perish or be destroyed. He wants everyone to repent and to enter into his salvation. In that salvation, there is a number of other breakdowns that he has for us, and I just want to emphasize them for at the beginning here. When he has given us his salvation, what's he doing? He's doing what he wanted to do in the garden. He wanted to partner with Adam and Eve. He wanted to walk with them in the garden in the cool of the day and to be with them, and they with him and he with them. And there would be a partnership. Partnership. Can you imagine? To be a partner with God? To have a connection with God and for him to be your partner and you to partner with him in life. How precious is that? Look at this verse in 1 Corinthians. God, the Almighty God will do this. Why? Because he is faithful to do what he says. From the beginning of time, he has said this. And he has invited you and me into partnership with his Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Partnership. Connection with God. Only one way now. Not by the law, but by grace and through salvation, we can have this partnership with God. And it's with Jesus Christ, our Lord. I want to emphasize that because this is really important. So often, we put emphasis on Jesus. And that's good. We should put emphasis on Jesus. But he's more than Jesus. He is the Lord. He is the Christ of God, the anointed, the lofty one, the one that's lifted up. He's more than Jesus. Yes, salvation, he's the Savior. But he wants more than that. He wants us to enter into a partnership with him through Jesus Christ. No man, no woman can come unto the Father but by me, is what Jesus says. That's why Jesus could say, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. That's the way we know God. That's the way we connect with God. And that's why we need to have that partnership with God. Partnership. What does that do? It leads us into relationship. It gives us the privilege of relationship with God. And it's because of our faith. Romans chapter 5 and verse 2 says, because of our faith, Christ has brought us. I think we're having difficulty, aren't we? I'm just pausing because I don't want you to miss what I want to have for you this morning. So just bear with us for a moment. Just so I review it. He's given us His will, and His desire for us is salvation, okay? We know that. His next will and desire for us is that we would have partnership with Him. And now we want to look a little further, and the next step in that desire of God for us is to have a relationship. To be not just connected, but to have a relationship. To have, because in Romans 5 and 2 it says, because of our faith, Christ has brought us into this place of undeserved privilege. Relationship, undeserved privilege, where we now stand, where we are once we're saved. And we confidently and joyfully look forward to sharing God's glory. That's the relationship that we can have with Him. That's so important. That's so important. To have relationship. And then He calls us into fellowship. Relationship. And that translates into fellowship. You know what fellowship is. Fellowship is when one is in harmony. It is togetherness. Are you going to catch up to me? There we go. Keep going. Next. Okay, here we are. Okay. So what is fellowship? It is when one is in harmony together, walking together, doing what we do together when we come together on Sunday mornings. We have fellowship one with another. But you know what? I have to tell you, that fellowship that you and I can have with each other is dependent on the fellowship that we have with God through His Son when we fellowship with Him every day. Every day we get to know Him. Every day we walk with Him. We want to fellowship with Him. It's got to be a desire in our hearts. As the deer panteth after the water brook, so panteth my heart after you, O God. That's what David said. And that's the thing that's so important for us, that we desire to not just to know God in salvation, but to know Him in partnership, to be in a real relationship with Him. Even you, dear young people, to know God and to want Him more than the breath that you take. It's so real. It's so precious to know God. And that fellowship is harmony. It's togetherness. Here's John. Don't you love John in the Bible? He's the one that put his head on Jesus' breast. He's the one that was so close to the Lord. He knew him no more than his Savior. He knew him as his Lord, his master, his teacher. And he said, we proclaim to you that we ourselves have actually seen and heard. So that why? So that you may have fellowship. I'm wanting to teach you to have fellowship. And that fellowship is with us, yes. And our fellowship, and our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. That's where it starts. That's what's so important. That's what God's will, that's God's desire for us, that we would have fellowship with him. At the beginning of the church era in the book of Acts, look at what it says. And all the believers, devoted, committed, determined to give themselves what to? To the apostles' doctrine, to the teaching of the Word of God, and to fellowship, coming together like we are this morning and having fellowship with God, and to share in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. The church, the local church, is such a real place to come together and to experience the unity, the fellowship of one with another. And why? Because we are like a human body that has many parts. This church has many parts. But the many parts make up one body. One body. And so it is with the body, the church. Where we come together, we need one another. We need to come together. We need to let that be part of our life. Let that be, because we fellowshipped with God, we want to fellowship one with another and help one another and encourage one another and be in fellowship. We need to have a strong desire to come together and to fellowship like the early church did in the book of Acts. So what happens? What happens sometimes when fellowship and when partnership and all of these things start to break down? What happens? Well, temptation. Temptation comes. And what does it do? It draws us away. It entices us. And it drags us away. And sometimes we think that we can go to work in the morning or we can go to bed at night and we can do it without fellowship with God and spending time with God. We think we can do it. And we get drawn away by all kinds of things. We're going to focus on a couple of them in a few minutes and you'll see what I'm talking about. We get drawn away. And temptation comes from our own desires. And they drag us away. Here's God doing everything that he can do to draw us together, to draw us to himself. And here's something that we have in our life that draws us away. And what is it? It's sin. It's sinful. And it gives birth to death. The desires give birth to sinful actions and things that we don't want to do, but we have no control. And I often say this, and I say it to myself all the time. If God is not here, something else is. If God is in front and center in our heart and in our desire, as the song that we sang earlier, more than anything, if he isn't, something else is. And you know what? It can take us away. It can draw us away. And when it is allowed to grow, because it will grow, you know, what's that small today will get bigger and bigger if we let it. If we let it. If we are not committed to God and to him and knowing him as Lord of our life and letting him help us to walk through life. You know, Jesus wasn't kidding when he said, I am the way. I am the truth. And you put those two together and what do you got? Life. That's it. That's what he wants to give us. And it's not just life. It's life more abundant. Isn't that great? Life more abundant. Not silver and gold, but real life. Life that really matters. So what do our own desires look like? What do they look like? Well, the Bible has a lot to say about them. This morning, when I was reading in the book of Galatians, I was absolutely amazed at how much was there about desire, our sinful nature, our sinful desires, and how we get drawn away. What happens? Like Paul said when he wrote Galatians, oh, foolish, foolish Galatians, why have you let this draw you away? So what happens? It's just like I said. If God's not here, something else is. You know, we have to be satisfied. We have to have something that's out here to occupy us. It's so important. Let's pray. Like the song. Thank you for choosing that song, brothers and sisters. That was special. That our desires are to know God more than anything. Look at this. When we get drawn aside, look what happens. It is what comes from inside. It's what comes from inside that defiles you. For from within, out of a person's heart, comes evil thoughts. What do they look like? Oh, they could be pretty. Look at the list. They could be sexual immorality. They could be theft. They could be murder. It could be adultery. It could be greed. It could be wickedness. It could be deceit. It could be lustful desires. It could be envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All of these vile things come from within. They are what defile us. They are what occupy us. They are the things that we get involved in. Some less or more than others, whatever. For from within, the next one, I think that's... We asked the question a minute ago, so what happens? Look at this. This is what happens. Most of you are adults here. And here's Paul talking to the church at Corinth, and he says this. I had to feed you with milk. I had to just give you milk. Why? I couldn't give you solid food because you weren't ready. You weren't ready for it. You couldn't take anything stronger than a little glass of milk, like a baby. Why? And you still aren't ready, he said. For you are still controlled by your sinful desires. They're still controlling you. You're still giving in to them. You're still not doing what I want you to do. You're not obeying me. You're not coming to know me the way I want you to know me. So what happens? You're jealous of one another. You quarrel with each other. And doesn't that prove that you're controlled by your sinful desires? Aren't you living like people of the world? And that's what happens sometimes. We get preoccupied. We forget the fact that we belong. We've been saved, remember? We are partners, remember? We have a relationship with God. And we need to let that grow in the fellowship that we have with Him and not get into these dangerous areas and let our heart go. We need to be front and center with God. So I said to you, we're going to talk about a couple of the so-called issues that we have as desires. We have two, and they were listed. And this one, the first one, I want to talk a little bit about because it often occupies us. It controls us. And if it doesn't, we want it to. We have a greed, and people who long to be rich fall into temptation. Greed is a big thing, you know. To be so hungry to be like our neighbor or to have a better whatever. And we fall into the temptation and are trapped. Trapped by many harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith, from the very fellowship that God has purposed for them, because they have such a desire to be rich. I know all about that. I lost my relationship with God, and I lost my relationship with my wife almost 35 or closer to 40 years ago. And went into, you know what, my life. But I told God, and God restored me over 35 years ago. And I told God at that time, I will put my hand in yours, and I will want that fellowship and that relationship more than anything else. And God is always faithful. He will always help us. He won't leave us. He won't forsake us. His will never change. His desire for us will never change. It's us who let it change because we let those harmful desires come in. And sometimes it's greed. And if it's greed, you know what it can do. It can destroy. It can destroy us. It says it can destroy us. Wherever your treasure is, whatever is up front is what's going to occupy you. And if your treasure is up there and there is a desire in your heart to be in there and have that experience, that can be very, very real. And you know it and I know it. It can take us and rob us of what God really has for us. And His desire is that we have all those things that we can experience in relationship, in fellowship, and so on with Him. No one can serve two masters. I think this is important to emphasize because sometimes we think we can do both. We think that we can put as much emphasis as we want there. We can work as many days and as much as we have to get ahead and do what we have to do. And we can neglect our kids. We can neglect our wife. We can do anything that takes us away and robs us because we are greedy. We want what we want at any cost, and we will do it. And what happens? You know what? I'll tell you what happens. We lose. We lose. We don't only lose what God has for us, but we lose those things that God has given us. I know all about it. And it's so important to know you can't do and you can't serve two. You can't serve God and you can't serve your greed and your desire at the same time, because look what it says. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and not the other. And you will despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to greed or to money. It's so important that we get it right, that we put emphasis where emphasis is meant to be, and that will help us to proceed. So here's another verse. Look at this. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others. Nothing wrong with having what God gives us. We don't envy those. We need not envy those that have, because those that have, if they do what they are called to do and they use it to benefit others and make friends, then when your possessions are gone, look at this. They will welcome you to the eternal home. What you do here, what you sow here, you will reap in a coming day. And you will reap and you will give glory to God. And if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with it? So God is real in that He gives us what He wants to give us. But He wants us to use it in such a way that we will honor Him in it. Next. Is there any way we can lift this up so that it kind of shows the whole slide? No? Okay. All right. The other one that we wanted to talk about is immorality. We talked about greed, okay? You know what I'm talking about. You know what that does and how it can destroy. And here's another one that's really real, and I want us to emphasize it a little bit, and it's the other side of desire. It's an immorality that happens in the world in which we live in. It's real today. It's real. Believe me, it's real. I work with it every day. Every day. I work with individuals who struggle in these areas. And I want to tell you that it is so real. We can't be afraid of it. We can't not want to talk about it. It's important that we talk about it. And I always say to the individual that I'm talking to when it comes to any of these areas, and let me just pull up my slide here and I can list them to you. There's adultery. There's fornication. There's pornography. There's masturbation. And there's homosexuality. And that's just a few of that list of sexual immorality that the Bible talks about. It is so real that I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm not afraid to address it. And I want to tell you that up front, when I talk about it, here's the point. I call those fruit issues away up here. They're just things that happen to us in life. And it's because of our neglect of God, or from spending time with Him and not letting our own desires take over and let His desire for us happen. And then these things happen, but I call them fruit issues. And here's the point. It's about the root issue. It's not so much about the fruit issue. I'm working with a young man in Seminole, Texas. And he's got a major struggle. I know it. He knows it. He doesn't even know how to deal with it altogether, but I'm sure trying to help him. And you know what? I'm not even too interested in the fruit issue. Does that surprise you? He's sitting there in his truck and he's drinking a beer. So what? That's the thing. It's so important. You know, he said, I'm so glad that you're there to help me and trying to help me. He said, every time other pastors and other people have tried to help me, he said, I shut them off right at the beginning, because the first thing they do is they want to judge me. They want to condemn me. They want to nip at those fruit issues. And you know what? You don't have to tell anybody what those are. They already know what those are. And what the real issue is that you're trying to convince them of and get them to have a desire for is to know God. Right from the beginning of what we talked about today, salvation, partnership, relationship, fellowship, all those things are the root issue. Those are the things that we want to work on. Those are the things that we want to develop in an individual. That's the most important thing, is to get down under so that they can be rooted and grounded properly and grow up. And guess what? Those fruits that are not so good will fall off. I have a story of a young man in my book. Some of you may have got my book last year, but if you didn't, it's available on Amazon. But in that book, I have a story about a young man, and his name is Frank. And he was a street pastor, invited him to come and hear the gospel one Sunday morning. And he came, and he heard the gospel, and he got saved. He trusted Jesus. He got saved that Sunday morning. And at the end of the session with the pastor, he said, I need to go. I better go now. He said, I got to go home, and I'm going to be with my boyfriend. And guess what the pastor said? Do you think he put the finger to him and said, oh, you can't do that? Do you think he tried to push the truth down his throat? No, he didn't. You know what he did? He said, Frank, he said, I hope you'll come back next week. Oh. And next week when he came back, guess who was there? Me. With the pastor to talk to Frank. and encourage him in the root issue, in his relationship with God. And you know what? At the end of our little session on that Sunday afternoon, do you guess what Frank said? Frank said, yeah, could you tell me, oh, I love this. He says, could you tell me what God says about homosexuality? Oh boy, were we ready? We knew right where to go to help him. And we helped him. And you know what? That day, you know what Frank said? I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell my boyfriend, finito. Finito. It's over. I want to obey God. You see? That's what it is. That's what it is. It's having God here and having a relationship with God and letting him have his purpose, his will, and his desire in our life and putting him where he belongs to be in our heart so that we can have a desire after God. And we can do what God wants us to do. And you know what? Frank is an elder in his church today. And he's married, and he's got 2 kids that are just about the age of some of you here, 19 and 20, maybe 19 and 18, I'm not sure. But I call them my grandkids. So beautiful. When we let God do what he wants to do. And even though we have an issue, God, doesn't matter what the issue is, if it's greed or if it's immorality or whatever it is. You got the list of them there. Whatever they are, if we let God have his way and we give him his rightful place and we keep our hand in his hand and we never take it out, ever. I always say to God, God, I won't even take my baby finger out because I know what happens when I take my hand out of God's hand. You know what happens? I'm on my own, and I cannot, nor can you, do it. We cannot do it on our own. He never purposed us to do it on our own. That's why Jesus said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to let you know that I am life, and I'm life that you need, and I can help you. We're going to move on a little bit. So God abandoned, see, when God is so holy, and he is so righteous, and he is so real, and he cannot, you can't mix it. You can't do both. We talked about that when it came earlier. You can't love God and love money. You can't love God and serve your sexual urges or your desires. You just can't do it. You can't do both. And what happens, and it's sad to say, but what happens, God abandoned them to do what was in their heart's desire. That's what God has to do. He will leave us to do our own thing. And that's so sad that we let him leave us because of our own shameful desires. So, do not let sin control the way you live. Do not give in. Do not give in to sinful desires. Do not let any part of your body become an instrument of evil to serve sin. I have to emphasize this right now. Because here's what happens. So many people that I work with, maybe that you work with, they say to me all the time, I pray. Well, you know what? Prayer is amazing. We all know answers to prayer, and that's important. But you know what? It's not the most important thing. It's much more important that we let God talk to us. He has more to say than you do and than I do, you know. He has a lot to say. And he wants to teach us. He wants to help us to be overcomers in any of these situations. And we can't let it control us. See, here's the point. We talked a little bit earlier about partnership. Partnership. That means that you and I have a part to play in our recovery or in our struggle. Notice here, do not let sin control the way somebody else, the way you live, the way I live. Don't let anybody else control it. You help to control what you do. Do not let any part of somebody else's body, no, your body, become an instrument of evil. And look at that after. No, not yet. Give yourselves completely to serve sin. Instead, give yourselves completely to God. It's a responsibility. We have responsibility. We have to accept our responsibility before God. As we grow up and we become young men and young women, we have to accept where we are and what's happened and take responsibility for it. We maybe didn't do it, but we have to take responsibility for it. And we have to work at it. We have to do our part. That's the point. For you were dead, but now you have new life. So your whole body is an instrument to do what is right. What for? For the glory of God. That's why we were created. That's why God has given us this life, is so that we can bring glory to his name. Next. I'm going to move a little bit quicker. Look at this in Romans 7. This is Paul talking, and I like it so much. I rest on this verse so many times. Oh, what a miserable person I am. Who is going to free me? What am I going to do? How's it going to happen? Who's going to free me from the life that is dominated by sin and death, or who's going to help me? And look at what he says. Oh, I thank God. I thank God. And that's what I'm here to tell you today. And I can witness it big time in my own life. And that is that the answer is in Jesus Christ our Lord. He's the answer. If you want victory, if you want to deal with temptation, and you want victory in any way, in anything in your life, you need to know that it's through Jesus Christ. He has been tempted in all points, such as we have, and yet without sin, but he is able. And not only is he able, he's willing. His desire is to help us to overcome. No matter what it is, to be an overcomer, to have victory, and to be able to bring glory to his name. That's the purpose for which he has helped us. And look at this. For the word of God is alive, and it's powerful, and it's sharper than any two-edged sword. And what does it do? It cuts between, it separates what is important between soul and spirit, between joint and marrow. And here's the main thing. It exposes our innermost thoughts and our desires. And that's why we need to spend time knowing God. That's why we need to open our Bibles and feed our souls. I often say, when I'm in a meeting like this, how many people had breakfast this morning? And I get about 99% of the hands go up. How many people plan to have lunch today? I do. See, we look after our body. We feed the body. But what about the soul? The soul is going to live forever. The soul is what's going to go with us. It's so important that we feed the soul. Because why? Because it exposes. It helps us. The Spirit of God convicts us and convinces us of truth that will help us. And what does the truth do? What does the truth do? It sets us free. It sets us free from our own and wrong desires. It sets us free. You want a pill to make you better? Here it is. You want something that can heal you and help you? Here it is. It's God's Word. Next. So, instead, here's the point. You see, this is our responsibility. What are we supposed to do? Clothe yourself. Oh, I pray to God. No. You can, but you know what to do. Clothe yourself with the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, and don't let yourself think about ways to indulge in your evil desires. Get to know God. Let God help you with your desires. Let Him heal you. Let Him help you and give you victory over your desires. Next. It is God working in you, giving you the desire and power to do what pleases Him. That's it. That's the last verse I'm going to give you, because that's God's desire. It's God, and He desires to work in us, in me, in you. What for? To give us the desire and the power to know Him and to please Him. That's why He created us. That's why He gave us new life. That's why He wants us to enter in to His desires and not our own. Or, if it is our own desire, it's His desire. That we desire to know Him. We desire to please Him. Because you know what? Someday we're going to be with Him. And He's going to judge us for all that we have done or not done. And so let's not let any of these wrong desires take us away and draw us away, but let us be drawn closer to God. May God help us this morning to make our desires His desires, because His desires are to know, for us to know Him, to love Him, to obey Him, and to serve Him more and more every day. May God bless you to enter into what He has for you and what He has for me. May God bless you. Thank you very much.